We were expecting to launch the product in 1.5 years, but we launched it in 6 months, which was a record time to market for us in the company.
I mean, what you're talking about, Carol, is like, was it a 5x, 6x improvement in speed? Right. With as you say, the same people. It's not that you swapped out people, brought the A team. You had the same people. You just rethought how the system worked and their role in it.
That's Carolina Wosiack leading agile transformation at Kraft Heinz. What started out as just one pilot is now 130 teams and over $1 billion in value.
And today she's sharing what actually has worked in this transformation that has been really remarkable. How they cut the timing of product launches from 3 years to 6 months, how they built a system that unlocks a torrent of ingenuity and initiative, and what leaders have to learn and frankly unlearn.
I'm Kate Isaacs.
And I'm Michele Zanini, and this is Leaders at All Levels. When did you, as Kraft Heinz, embrace this idea of agility at scale? What prompted this, and what kind of goal and aspirations are you kind of pursuing through this?
So we have been in this journey for 5 years. And what we realized back then is that we were lagging behind the industry. So we were not innovative. And we also wanted to explore more this new thing for the CPG industry. It wasn't new for other industries, but for CPG was agile, right? We decided to go down that road because we had a very practical tension that we had lovely brands, our strategy was sound, but between the strategy and the outcome, the execution was not being done as we expected. So we were not achieving the outcomes we expected. So, Michele, I think for back in the day, agile was for many companies a new way to deliver projects. So it wasn't what it is for us today, that is a guide to deliver strategy while transforming the operating model. That is our definition for today.
That's really interesting, and it gives a roadmap for a lot of organizations that might want to start with this, where they can do a sort of bottom-up approach like you're doing. So that's a great story. So let's talk a little bit about your role. So you're leading the team that's really catalyzing this shift. So can you tell us about it? How many people are there? What kind of work do you do with the various businesses? How does it work?
What I love, Kate, about what we do is that it's very pragmatic, as our culture is. So it always starts from which is the opportunity I want to address or the problem I want to solve. And then based on that, we define what is the best approach from our principles and practices we have collected in these 5-year journeys that we call the Playbook. And then we also define who in my team is going to help. So basically, at the moment, my team is about 50 people. They're full-time, and 20 people that are partially allocated. And this means that we have, different people with different backgrounds. And the idea is always to be a close partner to whoever's driving the change and needs to deliver some scope. And we work in incremental cycles, and we want to understand where we are and bring change step by step. Because I also know that some organizations decide to do, I would say, a more disruptive approach. But that for us was something that would be harder to do. So we decided first to, make sure that the concept was approved, then we could scale, and then people understand what you're doing. We work in a pool, as a pool organization, not much as push. We know that pushing change doesn't work that well. We tried, but I'll tell you that the teams that we pushed were the ones that had less adoption, right? And also helping leaders to understand, the change that is needed from their end. So sometimes, Kate, we start from where is easier. For instance, we have something that is very strong in our culture, that is the MBO. So the objectives model that we use. So OKRs is something that our leaders could understand because it talks about focus, talks about how you measure focus, how do you iterate. So that was an easier step of change for us. This is how we were building change step by step. The playbook, for instance, is something that in the beginning, I didn't want to do it. I said, I'm not going to create a playbook because this is just going to tell us what to do. It's not going to give us space. But then one of our KHX leaders, Corey, he told me, but it's very important that people understand what you're doing and you make it easier. So create a playbook so they can make it, their own.
Can you maybe just give us a tangible sense of what this playbook looks like and what are the ingredients? Maybe pick one of these examples, one of these cases that you worked on, and just help us bring that to life, if you could.
So let's talk a little bit about the applications, right? And we say there's 3 applications and there's 3 levels. And the levels are light, flex, and full. So basically, we understand that you're not gonna most likely start with the full model with all the resources, practices, and principles. Maybe you need to try something. So that's why it's a pull model. So that is the light. When you go to flex, is that you can pick and choose what you want to make sure that you are addressing your challenge and it's meaningful for your maturity. When it's full, it's like you have the full support of my team, you're bought in, you are benchmark or trending towards a benchmark. So one of my favorite cases is what we did with product innovation. And the reason why it's my favorite case is because we basically said, let's take the principles, let's, brainstorm on the practices and let's see if we can make it happen, right? And we convinced one business unit president back in the day of emerging markets to give it a try. And that is not a small thing in a $25 billion, dollar organization. But one of the guys, bought the idea, and we decided to do a pilot. And the pilot was made in Brazil. It's called PIPA, the name of the project. So basically, what we wanted to do was to reduce the time to market of one of our products, right? And launching a new product to market could take up to 36 months. And that is a lot in a fast-moving consuming good. It didn't seem fast-moving consuming goods, right? With 36 months. So then the challenge was, teams had a lot of things to do. We had a traditional stage gate governance in place. Decision rights, funding logic, incentives were pretty much traditional. And leaders were struggling to reach, their targets because it was taking, frankly, too long. And everybody was, more, not everybody, but mostly all companies were, a little bit faster than we were. We said, okay, for sure it's not the people because we know we have good people around here. So maybe it's the system. So let's do something about it, right? So we said, let's do PIPA. PIPA was, how can we launch pasta sauce with 2 brands, one brand called Carol and Heinz, fully in-house in Brazil. So Brazil was back in the day the most important emerging market for us. So let's do that. Let's go big in the beginning, which is also, not very, it's a bit counterintuitive, but we decided to go there. We made sure that, we had clear deliverables and we redesigned the way people worked. We redesigned the time allocation of people. We redesigned the decision rights. We made sure that we were working as a small unit with more autonomy. We were expecting to launch the product in 1.5 years, but we launched it in 6 months, which was a record time to market for us in the company. Not only that, which is already amazing, right? People were happy, but we have some other key things that were very important, like, the time spent in meetings fell by 31%, so people had more time to do more projects. People were 55% more satisfied by going to work, so engagement raised. And then we were like, well, this really works. So what's next? And then the Chile managing director invited us to work with a launch, and we launched the first Kraft ketchup ever in emerging markets. And in just a couple of months, we reached high 2-digit market share, which was amazing, with very little cannibalization of Heinz ketchup. And we made something that was very, very important. And I'm going to say it seems so simple, but it's so powerful, is that we managed to make sure that we cut by half all the pipeline. So this was very important because strategy is not just what you do, right? It's also what you don't do. So we said, we're going to stop this. And at the beginning, Michael, we thought, oh, we can make 20 projects by team. But we learned as time was go by that actually 7 was the golden number for us. That's how much a team can take.
So, Carol, I know you have countless examples, but maybe if you can give us maybe another one from maybe a more mature market where you basically found a way to unlock new value creation.
So, Michele, I love the Costco Canada case. And the reason why I love the Costco Canada case is because it is a mature market in which, we saw there was a huge opportunity with one of our key clients. And we knew that if we just, had the right approach, we would have a lot of success. So basically, what we did is that we decided we needed to have a retail model alignment. So meaning that we need to connect more with the client to know what they wanted so we could create products that would make sense for them so that, I'm thinking about here now at the moment, like zero distance to customers. We are not there yet, but it's a very good principle. But we are much closer than we were before. And that, for instance, led us to create unique pack formats because this is a club. As in North America, we say the club channel. So Costco is a club channel. And we took our brands like, very, I would say, important brands like Classical, Kraft Dinner, Maxwell House, and Heinz. And we worked with Costco Canada to do something different. And what changed? I find it so interesting and humbling at the same time when I talk about what we did. If I tell you the story, it seems kind of, simple. But to make it happen is where, is the real challenge, right? So to make it simple, we created, one list of priorities for the team, which we call integrated backlog. And instead of multiple disconnected project plans, which is something that usually happens in a matrix organization, and Kate was saying. So we created, these are just the list, it's locked. That's all you have to do, Tim. Then we created, quarterly OKRs, again, the OKRs, and make sure they were connected with the net sales value and the margin. And that was very important because we connected with the CFO, the country president to make sure that those were connected and everybody was agreeing with that and believed on that. Then what we did was basically granting decision rights to the team. So we removed them from the usual, I would say, more hierarchical structure governance models, and we really reduced the touch points. So basically nowadays they have to talk to 2 or 3 people and in quarterly reviews in which they tell them how they're doing. Besides that, they don't need to attend a lot of the meetings. They create a dashboard with all you want to ask of this team. All the functions can go there, have it a look, it's self-service. Otherwise, they're just going to show up every quarter to talk with them and 2 other people. And they have weekly reviews. They're focused on learnings. And basically what we achieved so far with this amazing team is that we already have 15 million Canadian dollars NSV delivered. We are tracking 200 million in 3 years' time, which is amazing. Execution cycles are shortened. The rework decreased as well. And the last thing I wanted to say was this shift about compliance to ownership, which was the most important cultural aspect that I see in this team. Now, that's why if I talk to any team in North America, Costco Canada is always the example.
Yeah, just getting the hell out of the way
Yeah.
is like 90% of the answer.
Correct. And it's funny, Michele, because sometimes it happens also with ourselves, like with my own team. I started when I joined saying, hey, we decide everything in a circle. I'm just another head. As you are heads, I'm another one. And sometimes they would come to me like, hey, Kara, I'm doing this. I was like, yeah, I hear you. So what do you want to do about it? No, I just wanted to check, like, how do you feel it? And then they started getting, the hang of it, like, she's not gonna give me an answer. And I said, because I know, you know the answer. So I think it's this sign-off culture that I also think that is something that changed in Costco Canada, and I did with my team, and I encourage other leaders to think about, is like, if you hire the right people, they can take decisions, they can make the decisions. So sometimes what they need is someone, they need some, they need to know you're in with them in the game. Sometimes they lack data and you can help, asking good questions. So again, I sometimes I feel so simple, but it's down to this, continuation of good practices, I would say.
What is some personal advice you'd give for leaders inside of large traditional companies like yours who want to start on a similar journey, but they don't know where to begin? And also personally, what do they have to do as leaders that might be a little different from what they have been doing?
Kate, I started doing like 3 pieces of advice, and now it's 10 pieces of advice. So say I'll try to
All
keep
right.
I'll try to keep it short, but let's see. The first thing is that I really love and it made a whole lot of difference for me is start with real work. So, pick a business problem that matters and redesign how you're going to tackle it. Start by the problem or opportunity. That is the first thing. The second thing is design for evolution and adoption. You don't know what is going to be the solution, but make sure that, what you're designing is flexible enough so you can learn and apply the learnings. The third thing is about if it's not working, it's probably think first about the system and not the people, because usually the people, they really want to make it work, but something is usually blocking them. So I would say that is the third one. The fourth, I already said, transformation is a journey, not a rollout. The fifth is motion is important, but you really have to, reap some, benefits and get some evidence so people understand. Shared language, which we spoke about, it's very important to make sure that people understand and is coherent, what they are going through. I think another one we haven't spoke about is about learning. So I think sometimes people say, oh, let's do a lot of training and coaching. For me, learning is best when it happens in daily work. So I would rather, and that's how my approach with my team is, to put someone that knows how to coach and has been through this journey working with the teams, than putting them in a retreat of, a week to learn about it. Eighth would be, not everybody goes at the same speed, and that's all right. So that's why it's important to understand the patterns, and that's how the maturity model helped us, so we can share the knowledge. The ninth would be, the turning point in your transformation journey, and where a lot of companies break, is when you realize teams are moving faster than the system, and companies don't do something about the system. So when this happens, it is a very important moment, and is a chapter change to see what you need to change in the system and in which order to keep drive momentum. And last is at scale, transformation is really a leadership job, and leaders, they're gonna shape how decisions are made, how ownership is supported. So it's not about the transformation office. It's not about, one individual. It is about the group of people that believe that transformation is needed, and they really, support it.
Wow, Kate, that was a great conversation. One thing that stood out to me was Carol's insight about the inflection point you get to in many transformations when the teams that you've switched on, that you've been able to work in a different way, start to evolve faster than the system around them, and they hit a particular roadblock at that point. And at that time, you really have to think about how do you create a system that enables this to happen at scale, as opposed to just pushing the teams to work harder, right? Because they're hitting that limit.
Yeah, it's a great example of bottom-up innovation forcing the system to change. And I really loved what she said about the sign-off culture. So she told us that when her team would come to her saying, hey, Carol, I'm doing this, and expecting her approval, she had to retrain them, and she'd turn it back to them and say, so what do you want to do about it? And eventually they got the message that she wasn't going to give them the answer. She wanted them to demonstrate an entrepreneurial spirit of going after the projects that they thought were important.
Yeah, and you can't argue with the results, right? Over $1 billion in cumulative impact, 130 teams operating in this way. across the enterprise, a number of really interesting cases, including the PIPA example she mentioned, where you're cutting product launch times from 36 months to 6 months. And again, all these are examples of putting people in a different system that enables them to express their initiative and ingenuity, as opposed to swapping people, right? It is about the infrastructure you create that enables this level of achievement.
Yeah, really inspiring. So, here are 4 points that you can borrow that you can try with your own team to get the ball rolling. First, her idea of 7.5. So she found that about 7 projects per team is the sweet spot of what teams can handle. And so they had to cut their pipeline in half to get there. So strategy is really not just what you do. It is what you stop doing. It's a great case in point on that principle.
That's right. Second lesson, pull, not push. So the interesting insight from the conversation with Carol, one of many, was that the teams that she and her colleagues struggled with the most were the ones where they were kind of pushing them to evolve into this new way of working. You should really focus on the volunteers, those who are ready to change, to embrace the different models. Let them run with it. Point the way for others. Create that level of demand so that others get the examples and the inspiration to do something similar.
Yeah, it's creating that coalition of the willing, and then they create the pull for the rest of the organization. So, Michele, the third principle that I took away from this is the idea of one priority list tying to real numbers that matter. So, creating a single integrated list of things that teams need to work on, and then tie your objectives and goals on those teams to actual financial outcomes, not activity metrics. It sounds simple, but it's something that a lot of people need to just do in order to move things forward.
Kate, the point you made about outcomes and not KPIs is really, really important. Being focused on real world impact will just unleash a completely different level of energy and imagination in trying to solve problems that really matter. Let me give you my last, and I guess this will be our fourth, which is the answer. So if you've hired good people, you should really stop being the bottleneck. When they come to you for sign off, for approval, ask them, what would you do? Do you already have a sense of what the answer might be? And most of the time they actually have it. So might as well just get on with it and stop being that intermediate layer of control that doesn't really add that much value in the end.
That's a really high leverage move. And I think that Carol's story shows us that transformation is really a journey. It's not a rollout of some gigantic blueprint plan. And I think that's the perfect note to end on, because anyone can get started.
There's no excuse not to get going, and you don't have to reach the peak in 6 months or 12 months, but you can certainly get on the trail. So if you want to have more examples and be more inspired by other organizations that are doing what Carol and Kraft Heinz are doing, which is distributed leadership, check out our Leaders at All Levels playlist and be sure to subscribe.
Thanks so much for watching. And remember, the answer isn't better people. It's a better system that gets the best out of your people.